DJ's in my car. BL. Woo! You gotta be smiling, you gotta be dancing, you gotta be shaking that ass.
All right, we are live. We are both here in Jersey where we pump fists, not gas. Dynasty Saturday Night 5, a Dynasty Fantasy Football podcast on the Going for Two live network. Please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review on the audio side. On the video side here, like, comment, subscribe, notifications, all that jazz. I am joined not by my usual co-host, but a special guest and fellow Paisan from Jersey, hence the opening, Dr. Jim Feretti. Doc, how you doing?
Oh man, I got tears in my eyes after watching that. That was a great. That intro was worth being here in and of itself. Forget about the rest of the show. Like, that was perfect. And the really funny thing is, like, I think we all have a friend like that, but there is a guy that I grew up with. He is that guy, literally. Like, that is him. So it's like that was perfect. But it's great to be here. My brother
was kind of like that guy for a while.
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. It's great to be here. Great to see you again, and ready to do a Jersey Squared show. We haven't had that in a while, so
yeah,
getting into it.
Yeah. So, for those of you who don't know what you just looked at,
it's kind of hard. It's going to be hard to put into words, but
those are some of Jersey's finest. Driving down the shore, or DTS, as we sometimes call it here. And they mention a particular popular club in Belmar called DJs, and it's where a lot of guys like that go, and a lot of fun and debauchery happens. And so, yeah, and it's summer, so we're getting the last trips DTS out of our system before we get to LDW, and reality starts again.
Fantastic.
And have you hit the shore at all this season? I am not a beach guy, so I try my hardest not to go.
Oh man, I love the beach, but I have not been down the shore this year. As some of you may know, I just had a daughter 8 weeks ago. So the whole summer has basically been newborn summer. So I've been doing that. So the most that I think we've gotten out is we got her out in the stroller and went around the block. That's about as close to the beach as we got.
So you're kind of are having a brat summer then, just
in a very different context.
Infant summer, yeah.
Very different.
All right, for those of you who don't know, we do lists of 5 here on Dynasty Saturday Night 5 as a way to talk about the Dynasty Fantasy Football topic we're discussing tonight. Is, we're approaching redraft season, and a lot of the stuff that we're going to go over tonight will be applicable to your redraft and sometimes even your best ball leagues and that sort of thing. But definitely with a dynasty focus. Our theme tonight is 5 value running backs, and I brought a list, and Doc has brought a list, and we're going to go back and forth on the ones that we like. I hired our crack graphics department, aka me, and I have some slides for this. I originally thought I might have had to done this solo, which is kind of why I put a little bit more into the slides. But in general, Doc, what's your approach to RB and Dynasty, and how were you sort of, when you were thinking about what a value is, how were you going about identifying that this episode?
Yeah, I think we're, as the audience is going to find out shortly if they don't already know, we're kind of diametrically opposed on how we evaluate the running back position. But I tend to build teams usually with a hero RB. So I'll get that early running back, and then I just kind of put it on the shelf, and I'm looking for those Konami code quarterbacks, those dual threat quarterbacks, the elite tight ends, the elite wide receivers. And, then I look up in round 9, 10, and 11, and I'm like, hey, I still only have one running back. So where can I get some value out of the position? And the ones that I look for in PPR leagues, guys that can catch the ball, because they can pop off for 4 or 5 catches, 50 yards and a touchdown. Hey, that's 15, 16 points in a PPR league. That'll work. And the guys that are one injury away. I mean, no surprise, I'm an injury analyst, and running back is the most dangerous position offensively in the NFL. So there's not really a lot of other positions where you have guys that can have this sudden increase in value just because somebody got hurt. And what's the saying? Targets are earned, but carries are given. So if you have a last name, if you're in the NFL and you're on a roster, you got a chance to have some meaningful carries and earn some points during the course of the year. And those are guys that I want to be in on. And either if I'm not drafting them late, then I'm kind of scrounging the waiver wire trying to pick them up. And that's kind of how I do it.
I don't know. I don't know how diametrically opposed we are. I do some hero. I do some zero. I think it's just like sometimes the guys we target in those builds.
How we get there. Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah. All right. So before we get into tonight's lists of 5, our episode is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog has it all. You can squeeze in your last best ball drafts before the season starts. I am finishing up the last of mine. Spent way too much money this summer, but hopefully it'll work out. And once best ball is over, they still have the player pick'ems that you can do throughout the year and each week. And of course, DFS, their battle royale stuff every week as well. And they're not just football; they have every major sport. So please sign up with promo code GF2, and you'll get a 50% deposit match up to $250. So if you are a new depositor, a new account, on Underdog, and you do your first sign up, your first deposit using the promo code GF2 with a nice shiny QR code here on the screen for the video watchers, you will have a 50% deposit match up to $250. It's that simple. Sign up, deposit some money, start playing, maybe even start winning. Hot best ball summer. That's about the only hot anything I'm doing this summer because I am boring. All right, you ready to hop into our running backs?
I am. I have a question for you. With all the best ball that you've been playing the last couple of years, what's the furthest that you've gotten as far as like in the major contests?
Oh, not far. Like I advanced to the playoffs in a bunch of teams. Like I had a pretty good advance rate relative to what the like statistically average advance rate would be, but I really don't get beyond that. So hopefully this year it'll be a little different.
All right.
Yeah. But I don't know. I certainly could use the bread. Kind of.
There's a lot of bread at the end of those contests. I was gonna say it's a humble brag. It's not even a humble brag. It's just a brag. I made the finals at Best Ball Mania last year. And
nice.
Was doing really well after the Saturday games. I had a lot of Dallas Cowboys and Detroit Lions, and then I got Breece Hall and Kyron Williams on Sunday, and that was the end of that. I finished kind of middle of the pack, and still won a couple $1,000s, and it was super exciting to see the prizes that you're eligible for. I think it was only 460 something people made it, and it was like, hey, you finish in the top 5, you're winning 7 figures or high 6 figures. So yeah, that'll work.
For sure. All right, so I have my 5 that we're gonna get to. Before we do though, I'm gonna talk about kind of like what criteria I tend to use when I'm looking for these guys. So just for like who made the list, I had to either be generally above consensus and or they're ranked below my top 30 and or they're below round 10 in Dynasty Startup ADP. And below my top 30 is not necessarily arbitrary. It happened to be a round number of 30. But the way I do my tiers preseason, after the first few tiers, the guys are in buckets that tend to be by player type. And those player types tend to also adhere to age. And so my RB30 is Raheem Mostert. And then I have this huge tier where most of the guys tonight come from. And that's a tier of like 1B running backs, high-end handcuffs, like RB0 targets, guys who are young and who can catch passes and that sort of thing. And so usually I look for someone who has some standalone value, but definitely good contingent upside. They've shown indicators in the past, and we have positive data points now They tend to be on the younger side and in their rookie contracts when it comes to breakouts. Just statistically, that's where breakouts usually come from. And they tend to have receiving upside, which is, again, fits this style of running back build that I do. And, of course, with Dynasty being PPR, it helps. I'm calling them a value simply because they will, I think, outperform their ADP and or accrue trade value. And that can accrue trade value in a redraft format or accrue trade value in a Dynasty format. And then certain things sort of guide me. The rule of upside wins championships. So taking swings over time will win more championships than stacking up small wins as far as your bets go. Also, chaos is the number one rule of football. And we think we know what's going to happen. And then we get to the year and chaos happens. So I want a roster that's not built for what things are going to look like in week one. I want a roster that's built for chaos, the inevitable chaos that's going to happen. And when you target these types of running backs, your roster benefits from that chaos. And then I think related to all that is this idea that for me, what we know can happen is sometimes more important than what we think will happen. So, for example, do I think, running back X is going to have this huge breakout and, finish in the top, 14, 18 running backs? If I had to bet money, I probably wouldn't bet that money. But do I think it's a good chunk of his range of outcomes and therefore I'm willing to invest in it? That's a different story. And so it's what I know can happen because we're bad at predicting. So what I think will happen is sometimes less important. Any thoughts on any of that before I move on?
Yeah, I really like the idea of chaos rules. And I think with some of the guys that I'm going to talk about, there's going to be some groans out there, but they tend to be RB2s and RB3s that nobody wants, that could at least give you some RB2 or RB1 output for some of the weeks, if not for most of the year. And the idea is you get them at a depressed price, but with the chaos component, they tend to give you more insurance so they can get you through injuries and bye weeks for the regular season. So if some of those upside swings don't hit and they zero out or they're just not playing, it's tough when the injuries hit and the bye weeks hit and you just have these holes on the roster that you're trying to fill. Some of these guys can kind of slide in there, still get you double-digit points or more. And when I look at how I build my teams, in the regular season, I want to tank because that's a long slog and there's a lot of chaos and a lot of bad things that happen. I want armor. I want insurance. And then when I get to the playoffs, I want the sports car. I want the Ferrari, or maybe with the Jersey Shore theme, we'll go with the IROC Z, depending on your preferences. And I want upside speed and performance. So I love the upside component that you talk about, but for me, it's a matter of timing. It's like, when do you want that? I don't want it in week 3. I want it in week 13, 14, 15, where I want that team that's going to score, boatloads of points. And if they don't, I'm probably going to lose anyway.
And I think that's fine. I want to be the guy who not only has those dudes because they're ready to score points, but I want to be the guy who now has to trade them to you because you're looking for them.
Yeah, that's valid too. And that's another area where we differ, because I'm like the do a couple of trades, lose the battle to win the war type of trader. Mm-hmm. And I know you're more of like accruing value and, taking advantage of the market, which I think is, it's great. There's two different approaches there.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I call myself a portfolio player, but I honestly don't have the time to manage the number of leagues that I have to really maximize that. So I should probably cut down. All right. Okay, so my first one is Dolphins rookie running back Jalen Wright. He's ranked in KTC running back 31, Fantasy Calc running back 32. Are going for 2 aggregate rankings. He's running back 33. And in Dynasty Data Lab ADP, he is the 1209, aka RB37. He is my RB33, so close to consensus in that big tier of running back 31 to 45 that I talked about. And I'm going to talk about them a lot tonight. So when we look at his draft capital. He's a round 4 pick, and he was picked at pick number 120. But the Dolphins traded up for him and traded next year's 3rd to get him in that trade up, right? So they kind of think of him as a 3rd round pick, if you will, even though they picked him early in the 4th. He had very good percentiles in a lot of the testing metrics, whether it's, broad jump, vertical, 40 time, and that sort of thing. I think his 40 was, I want to say 4.33, and he can probably contribute as a receiver, though that was part of the flaws of his college profile, that he didn't get a lot of that done. And I think the system fit with Miami kind of outweighs a lot of his college flaws. A lot of his college flaws were based on some metrics as far as contact balance early in the run. Also, that he had a great percentage of his runs against light boxes in that kind of gimmicky Tennessee offense, and didn't have much receiving volume. But 25.5% of his 2023 rushing attempts went for 10 or more yards. His weight-adjusted speed score was 114.1, and you want 100 really is your threshold for running back. So anything above that gets better and better. A 9.82 relative athletic score. And his final season yards per attempt and yards after contact per attempt were actually better than Devon Achane's final season, albeit on smaller volume. The Miami Dolphin running backs will produce and they will eat, and that's just the way the offense is. And so between the way the coach schemes the system for his runners in space and just the overall fact that the running backs are going to eat, he landed in probably the best spot, even for somebody with those flaws. He's a 21-year-old rookie, which is where a lot of breakouts come from. So he's like 11 years younger than Mostert, and he's heavier and more physical than Achane. Although Achane probably gets a little bit too much knock on that. He's actually beefed up a little bit this year and is further away from having to worry about being a track and field star at Texas A&M, and now can kind of carry that weight more. He's had some very good preseason performances. We've seen some very positive buzz on Jalen Wright. And while some people say there are 2 backs in front of him, that he's the 3rd back, I look at that as 2 chances for increased usage. He has 2 paths to get on the field. If the team is going to have a 1A and a 1B, that's 2 pretty even volume guys, or even usage, even production, even expected fantasy points guys that he can replace, whether through outplaying them or injury or whatever. So I actually like that for him. Maybe a little bit biased because he was my RB2 coming out. Doc, thoughts on Jalen Wright, and then tell me who one of your guys is.
Yeah, I really like the call here. Obviously, anybody that is on Miami, you kind of have to like, just due to the explosiveness of the offense. And the fact that you have HN there, you have Mostert there, it's kind of like when you think about running backs, the way that I like to think about it is like running back performance is like on a year-to-year basis. It's like a closed ecosystem. So it's like, it's really hard people want to do it, but I think it's really hard to extrapolate performance from one year to the next. So Raheem Mostert, never been a pillar of health. I think he's almost as old as we are at this point, but he was healthy last year and he scored a boatload of touchdowns. If I had to take a chance that was going to happen again, I'm probably betting against. And then Devon Achane, he's super explosive, but he also had some issues being undersized and staying healthy. So anybody that steps into the Miami offense, I think, has a chance to really outperform. So I like this call a lot.
Yeah. You make a good point about Mostert, because there are some sharp people who, I'm not saying they're wrong, but are leaning into this idea that, well, Mostert is just a guy whose peak is later in his career, and so he doesn't have as much wear and tear on him. And then my retort is 32 is 32. Like, as far as the body bouncing back. And one of the reasons that he hasn't had much wear and tear is, checks notes, he hasn't been available as much as some other running backs his age. So Yeah, I think there's paths here for Wright to really outperform his cost, whether it's in trade or ADP. Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna start at the top with mine, and you said this is the one that hurts you the most, so
Yeah.
you can extrapolate on that. But it's Alvin Kamara, and before you groan and turn the
Uh,
podcast off, hear me out. So his lowest PPR finish in the last 7 years was 16, so kind of
mhm.
still a high end RB2. That was his lowest finish, and all that hullabaloo last year, which depressed his draft price about his suspension and all this stuff. And all he did was respond with 75 catches, over 1,000 combined yards, and was the 12th RB overall. So he's still an RB1, even missing those 3 games. But he was the 4th RB overall on a points per game basis. So as uncomfortable as it might be to think about, as long as this marriage of convenience between the Saints and Derek Carr is going to continue, he's still got a chance to do something close to that again. In redraft, he's an RB2. In Dynasty, I think he's going even later because he's 29 now. So half of your Dynasty league probably isn't even going to want him. And I heard a funny quote the other day where it said, Dynasty players, it's like once your car insurance rate gets a discount, like they're not interested. So I thought that was really great. And it's like, yeah, he's 29, but he's got the receiving upside, which kind of helps smooth out the age curve. And, some of these guys, they just don't drop off the way that people think they do. It happens a lot later. And if you say, oh, this guy's washed, and you say it for multiple years, eventually you're going to be right. But how much production are you leaving on the table, for those 2 or 3 or 4 years where you're wrong and the guy still is able to perform?
Yeah, I feel you. And we talked about this before the show. Is I tend to be like the, get out early rather than late guy. And I'm not a fan of Kamara, but at the same time, I've got him above this infamous tier of running back 31 through 45 that I have, simply because he's on the top of this depth chart and definitely has PPR upside. So like until I see things where I need to move him, I move him. Now, just because he's ranked higher doesn't mean that I want him as much. Like if you're asking me who do I want on my roster, Kamara, who I have ranked 28th or 29th, or Jalen Wright, who I have ranked 33rd, I want Jalen Wright, right? And that's why I think linear rankings for running backs, linear rankings for Dynasty, and then especially for running backs, is hard because it's more dynamic than that. It's about, where you are in your win cycle, your team build, and that sort of thing. As far as a rusher, Kamara's had declining efficiency the last couple years. I think, he had one of those weeks last year where it was 13 catches for 33 yards. And it's like, that's a scam. Like you can't live on that, like for too much as a running back. And then I have to ask myself, is Clint Kubiak going to show Kamara the deference that maybe some other coaches might? And, or is he going to run a scheme that is actually better for, Kamara? So you don't know, and you hope that the better OC is an improvement no matter what. There's offensive line issues on the team. And at the same time, though, on the other side of the ledger, his stiffest competition, Kendre Miller, can't stay on the field, can't stay healthy. So you're looking at guys like Jordan Mims and Jamal Williams and, James Robinson and stuff like that. So, I think he probably could pay off a little bit, especially early in the season, But yeah, it's a Dr. Jim guy for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on to number 4, Bucky Irving. In fact, he's so cool, I forgot to put his last name on the slide and just called him Bucky.
That's it. He's like Cher. He doesn't need a last name. We know who he is.
So he's on Tampa Bay Buccaneers. KTC has him RB43, Fantasy Calc RB44, going for 2 aggregate ranks, running back 47. Dynasty Data Lab ADP, the 15th round, 1504 at RB49. I have him at RB36 in that infamous tier of RB31 to 45. Round 4, pick 125, 5 picks after Jalen Wright. We have a prospect who on tape was a very good player, right? Agile, vision, very good in space. very good receiving profile. I think 80-something catches over the last 2 seasons, including 56 in 2023. And he just turned 22 a few days ago, August 19th. So happy birthday, Bucky. He had some underwhelming athletic testing, especially at the combine, and some doubts about Pac-12 competition, Pac-12 defenses, Pac-12 wide open offenses, and the Oregon offense and how it operated are sort of overshadowing the positives in his prospect profile. He started, for me, pre-combine, he was my RB1. I said, listen, his combination of skill set is the best match for today's NFL. After the combine, I did knock him down some. I try not to make the combine matter too much, but when you look at the bucket of guys with that testing, you start to see that the path to being fantasy relevant is narrower, but I still had him in the top, I think, 5 running backs in the class. He had very good efficiency and very good peripherals in many categories in college. So as per Dynasty Zoltan, you can follow them on Twitter, since 2018, only 5 running backs out of college had a 15% plus explosive rush rate, 3.5 plus yards after contact per attempt, and 90 plus career receptions. Those 5 running backs are Travis Etienne, Saquon Barkley, Jahmyr Gibbs, Tony Pollard, and Bucky Irving. Per Sean Siegel of RotoViz, Irving averaged over 100 scrimmage yards a game across the last 2 seasons and caught 87 passes in those 2 seasons. Only one running back who had a minimum of 150 carries finished with a higher evasion rate in 2022, and that's higher than Bijan Robinson in 2022, and that person was Bucky Irving. Irving backed that up in 2023 with a 34.1% evasion rate, better than classmates Jonathan Brooks, Audric Estime, Trey Benson, and Jalen Wright. Generated 63 evaded tackles as a rusher and 21 additional as a receiver. And then over the last 2 seasons, 63 total just forced missed tackles, not just broken and missed, but the total forced was 63. And those particular stats of total missed tackles forced and missed tackles forced per game are actually very sticky for fantasy results with college running backs, more sticky than some other efficiency stats that a lot of people like. And in 2023, Irving led the running back position with 56 receptions and finished second to Ashton Genty with 564 yards total after the catch. This is a productive running back that is the running back you saw on tape. He can make his limited athleticism work. Now he's on the Buccaneers, who have an inefficient starter ahead of him in Rachaad White, a guy who the team has tried to look for ways to reduce Rachaad White's touches. They just didn't have much there to do it. This is the best person they've had there to do it since. They didn't really add anybody else. They just kind of, for safety, re-signed Chase Edmonds and haven't cut Sean Tucker yet. That's all that's there. He's had a very solid preseason, including, importantly, between the tackles. Some people say Bucky's best trait is receiving, and that's what Rachaad White does very well. And I say Bucky is as good a receiver as him and can be a better runner. So that's my retort as to why I love Bucky Irving this year, even with the quote-unquote bad athleticism at the combine. Doc, what say you?
I say take that, Rachaad White fans. No, I like it. I think that, Rachaad White's a very polarizing, running back this offseason. And if you're not in on Rachaad White, then yeah, you need to be in on Bucky Irving because he could kind of do like, what a diet Rachaad White did a couple of years ago and kind of do the same thing. So, and come out of nowhere and perform really well.
And we have a new offensive coordinator in town as well. Canales is gone. And what if that offensive coordinator just, the way that he wants to run things likes what Bucky does better, then if you have an inefficient starter like Rachaad White, who again, I have ranked 20 spots above because simply, he's at the depth chart and I have to capitulate to the volume that we think he's going to get. But who do I want on my roster at cost? I want Bucky.
Yeah,
So
and there's always that specter that Rachaad White gets hurt too, right? Like there's always that, which I think people acknowledge, but they don't really take it into account. And we have this idea of this static, like roster and depth chart, and then all of a sudden somebody gets hurt in week 2 or week 3, they're going to be out for a month, and that shakes everything up. And this is a great example of that. The one injury away guy, like this is a perfect example. Low cost, one injury away, and he could be really, really productive.
So who is your second running back de jour?
So this one's a little bit better because he's only 26. And this is just basically a recency bias play, recency bias alert. And one of my favorite things that I've been noticing this year, especially in the offseason, reviewing content, is when people are talking about recency bias and they fall victim to recency bias as they're acknowledging recency bias, which is kind of great. But it's Ramondre Stevenson. And you just look at the body of work without getting into any stats or anything else. Like, he was hurt last year. The Pats were a complete dumpster fire. And he was an RB1 as recently as checks notes 2022, where he was RB7 in PPR and RB11 in half PPR. So, new coach, now he's healthy. Team is improved, or at least not any worse, with a likely lean on the run with either Jacoby Brissett or Drake May at the helm. So I'll take a shot at a return to glory at a depressed price.
I don't mind Ramondre. I don't, as much as I mind Kamara for sure. Yeah. Ramondre looked bad, especially early in the season last year, as far as the efficiency, fans will tell you. I just wonder about the overall offensive environment, and I think it's one of those things where is it going to be, he's not going to get much because the offense and the offensive line is going to be pretty bad, or is it, between Brissett and a rookie, they're going to lean on the run more anyway, like the old, because they have they're running the Browns offense, but like the old school Browns offense where Nick Chubb just like ate. So there's definitely a shot for him to outperform his value. I've got him ranked, I think, in the 20s.
Yep.
Yeah, I have him 20, actually right at 20 at the top of a tier of 20 to 24. So I can definitely see him outperforming that value. I don't know by how much, but yeah, for sure. What kind of caught your eye as far as putting him on this list? Do you think he's just, like you said, the recency bias is decreasing the price?
I think that's all it is, really. I mean, like it really isn't a whole lot that's that much, different than it was a couple of years ago. But he had a crappy year last year. And again, recency bias is the number one thing that fantasy football players talk about. And it remains the number one thing that people fall victim to when they make their lists. And projections for the following year.
People draft way too much based on last year. And if you look at ADP, it's kind of more or less like especially early ADP, what happened last year,
Yep.
As much as we were talking about CMC before the show, and, can I be wrong about CMC this year in that I don't think betting on a 28-year-old running back to repeat that usage, volume, production, and health, another year is a good bet to make? No, I don't think it's a good bet to make, even though he's CMC and the 49ers are very good. So I don't think him being the 101 in redraft and best ball is the right pick, right? But, that doesn't mean I think he's going to be, worth a 4th round pick. It just, it's just a matter of people are kind of drafting off of last year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, with guys like CMC, like the word elite gets thrown around a lot. But I think he is a player that is truly, truly elite. He's like 1.5 players in one. So when it comes to guys like that, like CMC, Travis Kelce, like guys that are really like Hall of Fame level talents, I kind of fall into the mentality of like I make them prove me, I make them prove to me that they can't do it anymore before I discount them.
Yeah.
So I would still take him number one, but I've said that for the last 3 years, and so far I've been right. And if I'm wrong this year, then I have to live with that. But I'm not gonna pass on him and then have him do CMC things again, and then be crying in my beer over it. So I make him prove to me that he can't do it anymore before I get off the train.
There's a tear in my beer 'cause I'm crying for you, dear. You are on my lonesome mind. Great jukebox song. Any concern about Gibson stealing some receiving? Ezekiel Elliott led the team in receptions last year.
Yeah.
Any fear with Gibson? Because a lot, I shouldn't say a lot, but the reason in 2022 Ramondre was not just this level, but was like an RB1 finish, especially in PPR, was he had a good receiving year. Any worries with Gibson there?
It's not so much a worry. I like Gibson too. I just didn't want to like put them both on the list. And the thing is that I like them both in the sense that I kind of would say take either one that you prefer or take them both because they're cheap enough. And then if one of them gets hurt, the other one is going to benefit exponentially. So that's kind of the way that I look at it. But I do think that when they're both healthy, it's like Antonio Gibson being there is going to cap his upside. But I'm not really looking at that. I'm looking at it's baked into the price. And then on the weeks that Antonio Gibson gets hurt, he has much higher upside. So it's kind of that play. And like, well, let's say Antonio Gibson gets knocked out for a month or he gets knocked out for, longer than that. That's a pretty decent stretch where, you basically got RB1 projected production, for a really low price, approaching single digit, late single digit, double digit rounds. I could work with that. And then that gives me 5 or 6 weeks to figure it out somewhere else if he does come back and caps his upside again, or vice versa. You have Gibson and then Ramondre Stevenson goes out. That's almost like what happened with Zeke last year. I mean, Zeke was an RB2 last year coming down the stretch and, led me to a fantasy championship. So, nobody's wanted that guy for 3 years.
Yeah.
And just think about that statement for a second. I mean, that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah. All right. My number 3 is the guy who I think possibly has the highest floor in this scenario of the 5 that I am choosing, possibly the lowest ceiling of the 5 guys I am choosing. But I definitely wanted to include him, one, because I've just kind of been a backer since the pre-draft process. And when I look at some of these running back lists that people are putting out, he doesn't end up on these similar lists as far as like 0 RB targets or value running backs and that sort of thing. So I figured I would carry the flag for my man Ray Davis of the Buffalo Bills. KTC has him ranked RB48, also RB48 on Fantasy Calc, going for 2 aggregate rankings at 41. Dynasty Data Lab 1603 ADP at the RB52. I have him ranked as the RB37 in that infamous tier of RB31 to 45. Another round 4 pick, 8 picks after Jalen Wright, 3 picks after Bucky Irving. He definitely lacks the elite athleticism that a lot of the traditional 0 RB targets have. And he's an older rookie, which I think is usually outside the wheelhouse for a lot of these 0 RB lists. At the same time, I think that gives him, and his coaches have said so, a maturity, experience, and poise, as intangibles. And I know that's vibesy, but that's part of our data points, right? He has, of course, that backstory where he's had to overcome a lot, and he's done it and done it well and maintained, being a good person off the field and being a high performer on the field. He broke 1,000+ yards for 3 different colleges during his college career. He exhibits vision, patience, good pass pro, good pass catching. So he has a well-rounded skill set. Probably nothing elite, but definitely sort of a jack of all trades scenario, which I think expands the paths for his relevance. And the Joe Brady offense last year, we saw rushing increase when he took over for the Bills. After Joe Brady took over, they went from second lowest run rate to second highest run rate. And while they may not be second highest again this year, you're going to see more rushing. And I think really acquiring Ray Davis is part of a signal for that, as well as being willing to part with Diggs and Gabe Davis. I think you're going to see, a more scheme-based offense, a more consistent and efficient offense, rather than a dynamic, big play, Josh Allen puts everybody on his back kind of offense. And he has a path to right away a role for short yardage and goal line. They didn't really use James Cook inside the 10 and especially inside the 5 last year. So he's better at that than Cook. And he can lighten the load for Josh Allen. Josh Allen had 15 rushing touchdowns last year. I think 8 of them came from inside the 5. If you're the Bills, and they've kind of more or less said that, they don't want him doing that again this year. Now, Allen has talked about how he kind of has what he calls the smart guy and the reckless guy inside him, and that once in a while you have to let out the reckless guy. But I think as he matures and as the coaches build stuff around him, I think he's going to be smart enough to let that reckless guy out a little less, and they're just going to call fewer design runs for him inside the 5. And so while people have been saying, oh, well, yeah, Ray Davis is good enough to do the Latavius Murray role for the Bills, I'm like, no, he's good enough to do Latavius role plus more. So I think my hot take, I guess, is that the combination of James Cook and Ray Davis is going to be your off-brand Walmart Temu version of Gibbs and Monty from last year. I think he has standalone value as it is with that short yardage goal line role and can catch a pass or two in the 2-minute drill. You're going to need pass pro there as well. Not that he's going to get all the 2-minute drill work. Obviously, you want James Cook catching passes as well. And tremendous contingency upside should there be a James Cook injury, because he can do a lot of the running back repertoire. So, yes, number 3 on my list is Ray Davis.
I really like this call too. I mean, I with you, I was I think much higher than consensus on him in the pre-draft process. And I think with Joe Brady and how he came in and just kind of revamped the entire offense, like literally anything is possible. I mean, it was like, hey, Stephon Diggs getting 15 targets. Joe Brady shows up, Stephon Diggs getting 3 targets, and then shipped off to to Texas. So, I really like that. And I, like what you mentioned at the end, the contingency upside, which is code for what if the other guy gets hurt, which has been known to happen in the NFL on occasion, like every week. So I really like that. And for the price that you're getting him and for the, the explosive offense that Buffalo has, you have a guy who could just kind of slide right in there and give you a lot of points and a lot of production, in a lot of different ways.
And part of the Joe Brady increased rushing and James Cook being like a running back 5, I think, from like week 10 on or 8 on or something like that. I forget. But part of that also was James Cook explosive run rate, breakaway run rate decreasing because of that increased volume. So using Davis more also helps you preserve Cook. So he has a role that is beyond, I think personally, as much as we're predicting the future, better than Latavius Murray. Who is your next running back on the list?
All right. Well, this is the one. If I'm worried about any of them where it really could have egg on my face and I could be very, very wrong, this is going to be the one. And it's Austin Eckler. So, he was hurt last year, which I think affected him more than we know. But if you look back to the 2 years previous to that, he was the RB2 overall in 2021. He was the RB1 overall in 2022. So he really has shown, elite production ability. When you think about last year, in addition to getting hurt, like towards the middle and end of the year, he was really just kind of playing out the string in a bad situation. Like he knew the breakup was coming. Like he knew he wasn't going to be back. So it was just like, what was the motivation to really do anything and go out there and get hurt and maybe not get a job the next year because people think you're washed? And he may be, but I'm willing to take the chance that he's not, because he has the high floor due to the pass catching. He's shown that elite ability in the past. And if he does get some games with some more volume, like Brian Robinson gets hurt, or even if he doesn't, the offense looks like it could be more explosive with Jaden Daniels there. Even more vibesy, maybe this is the last thing. It's, I kind of, with running backs, it tends to be more vibes than stats with me, mostly because they get hurt so much. So it's like, you can have the most efficient running back in the world. If he's in the trainer's room, that's not going to do you any good. I'd rather have the guy that's out there actually getting the ball. But he's a great, Austin Eckler is a great guy to root for. He loves fantasy football. He loves fantasy football players. So, he's a great guy that, that I want to root for. I want to have on my team just in case he does produce. Then it's even that much better. And, the last thing I'll lead off with is, this up to this point so far, my running back rooms tend to not look so good in a bikini. I mean, you got some warts in there. You got some ugly production, but they produce more often than not. And that's what it's really all about. It's like, you got the teams that look great in a bikini, but they can't score the points for you. I'd rather have the team that can just go out there and get me the points, get me to the playoffs, and then hopefully I get hot and make a run. And I'm fine with that.
Fun fact, there are pictures out there and in my possession of me in a bikini. But before we delve too far into that, I was thinking one episode that maybe Josh and I might do is kind of like a what if I'm wrong, or what are we worried that we're wrong about episode.
Mm-hmm.
And as I think of these things mentally as I walk my dogs, as if one could think about things other than mentally, but I Austin Eckler ends up on that list because it's easy to say between age and usage over the years, and he's kind of washed, and as much as Kingsbury can have some offensive success because years 2 and 3 were very good in Arizona, is a rookie quarterback who likes to scramble a lot, gonna pass the ball much in checkdowns to Eckler, right? But then there's also he had that high ankle sprain, and I don't need to tell you, like in the NFL, guys can get back on the field after a high ankle sprain, but it's a longer time till like they feel right,
Yep, 100%.
And then on top of that, like, again, vibesy narrative street, but if anybody's going to sort of bounce back or whatever, it's going to be workout freak Austin Eckler, who takes great care of his body by all reports. And, I don't know, right? Like at some point in the year, Kingsbury, Jaden Daniels are on the same page where, he tucks it and runs less and checks down more. And then when you add in, should Brian Robinson get injured, they'll probably give some of the tough carries to Chris Rodriguez, but they'll also use Eckler more, and including close to the goal line where he was good in like a Blake Corum sort of way throughout his career, despite being slightly undersized. Mm-hmm. So if, I don't know which Austin Eckler story will be true. I think if you look at my rankings, I'm leaning into the more like the he's washed and too few checkdowns narrative. I have him dynasty RB 60, right? Mm-hmm. But like,
you're not alone. You're not alone, my friend.
I could easily see him leapfrogging some of the younger guys I have in front of him because like they just don't hit. Like Rasheen Ali might not make the roster, even though I love him. Dylan Laube, like who knows how much pass catching he's going to get in a terrible offense.
Kamani Vidal might get hit. Might get cut.
Yeah. So these are things where it's like I could totally see a few weeks into the season when I'm reshuffling things that are less strict on like the buckets that are very age based, where he's higher. But yeah, he's one of my I think I could be wrong guys this year. Yeah. All right. And number 2 on my list is Tyjae Spears, Tennessee Titans. I have been a Spears truther since before it was cool.
We have the tapes on that. We have the pre-draft injury discussion of him only having one ACL, and is that important? And apparently it isn't.
I liked him before he blew up at the Cotton Bowl, so obviously my love for him increased the more positive signs there were, but just saying, I was in on him early. He's ranked 18 among running backs on KTC, down to 26 on Fantasy Calc. Fantasy Calc runs on aggregating trades, and so that's how the values are generated. And so there might be something in the algorithm where if a player isn't getting traded as much, maybe the value is lower. But in going for 2 composite rankings, he is running back 22, so a little higher. You can get him in round 9 at the 909 in DDL startup ADP, which accounts for running back 26. I am ridiculously, irresponsibly high on Tyjae Spears, as I have him as at my RB12 in Dynasty, in a tier of 11 to 13. In 2023, he was a round 3 pick 81. He has a college workhorse profile with, I think it was a 31% overall team dominator, 85% backfield dominator, 6.8 yards per attempt over his college career. Although, little asterisk, it was on Tulane, and group of 5 competition. Great burst, great agility. So he kind of showed at the combine that the athleticism is there. He can play with the big boys, so to speak. In college, 4.55 yards after contact per attempt in 2022, while we're seeing 63 missed tackles. I think that was over the 2 seasons, I think. And then, of course, an elite elusiveness rating per PFF of 145.8 in 2022. He has tremendous change of direction. Is great at making people miss, and is a very good pass catcher. In 2023, as a rookie, he had a 15% receiving share and a 9.1 expected fantasy points, I think, per game, despite sharing a backfield with Derrick Henry. And some of his rushing peripherals were actually better than the aging Henry. And according to Sean Siegel, and I saw the chart, so it's not just according to Sean, among running backs who ran 200-plus routes last year, he was number 6 in targets per route run. His teammate, Tony Pollard, who is right now a co-starter, 1A sort of thing, he is younger and had better efficiency than Pollard on more routes. I do believe that Pollard will bounce back a little bit and be more like the Tony Pollard after the bye week than the Tony Pollard before it. But I still think among those guys, give me the guy who's more electric, explosive, dynamic, younger, better receiver, more efficient, better in space. That's the guy I want. And also, he's the cheaper one, right? The beauty of Tyjae Spears is also he works if Pollard's good or if Pollard's bad. Because number one, if Pollard's good, the offense is going to be, generally good. And also, the team has already said that they're kind of going to go hot hand and try to cut things as evenly as possible, right? So it doesn't mean that he's going to disappear just because Pollard's good, right? Obviously, if Pollard's bad or injured, to the moon, right? If the Titans are good and the overall offense is more efficient and the pie is big and more touchdowns are scored because of what they've built around goofy-ass Will Levis, then that's good for Spears. if the offense is kind of bad and they have to hide Levis even more and lean on the run even more, and or do more checkdowns and come back garbage time to minute drill stuff, then guess who benefits from that? Also, Tajay Spears. So therefore, with a few of these guys, I think they're standalone plus tremendous contingency value. My sort of mantra this offseason is the world is not ready for how good Tajay Spears will be this year. It's a bit of hyperbole. There are things that can go wrong with that Titans offense for sure. But yeah, Tajay Spears number 2 on my value running back list.
All right. And you alluded to it a little bit, and it was in that very same show when you were talking about Tajay Spears, we were talking about Will Levis. So I'm mostly joking, but I have a question for you. How do you reconcile your, putting it mildly, let's call it dislike with extreme prejudice of Will Levis juxtaposed against your love for Tajay Spears?
Yeah, so I think if the coaches have put some guardrails around Will Levis this year, while the receivers are aging, it's a better crop of receivers than they had last year. The offensive line has improved. It was not historically, but it was like a 28th or whatever run blocking per game or something offensive line last year. They've put some pieces in to improve that and brought in one of the best offensive line coaches in all of NFL history. So if they can put guardrails around Levis and work with him and scheme around what he can do and make the offense run, even though he's kind of bad, we've seen that before. Like we've seen he's a quarter. So there's 3 kinds of quarterbacks. You win because of them, you win with them, and you win in spite of them, or you lose, right? So
that is always the other option,
right? So I think he kind of teeters with these guardrails between win in spite and win with, and then on top of that, part of the guardrails, I think bringing in Pollard speaks to this, is that they want to use the running backs a lot. That they're not going to ask Will Levis to throw 700 times a game. Right. And so, yeah, I can understand how the two juxtaposed cannot make sense, but I can also understand how the two opinions juxtaposed fit each other.
All right. Well, as far as Tajay Spears is concerned, I'm just over here fanning myself, thinking about getting him in the 9th round or the 10th round of a draft. I mean, it's getting hotter in here than the dance floor DJs on a Saturday night.
Yeah.
So I really don't have anything to add there. Basically, my notes here are what Brian said, full stop. The only thing that I would add, not related to this, but if you pay attention to the running backs we've mentioned so far, we have a thread that unites them, even though they're on basically diametrically opposed areas of the age curve. And it's this idea of they have standalone value and they have high contingency upside. And I think that if you take nothing else away from this so far, that's a good thesis statement of like these guys that you look at the running back position. They can give you something, but there's one or multiple ways that they could give you a lot more. And I think he definitely fits the bill, just like multiple of the other guys we've talked about up to this point do as well.
And if you're a dynasty manager and you're afraid of, well, he's got no ACLs, well, fine, just flip him after this year, flip him off a good year, if that's your thing, he probably will have a shorter career than most because of that. But he can be one of those shine brightly for a couple of years and then be gone instead of burn out rather than fade away, as Neil Young says, right?
Yeah. And, again, the average career in the NFL is what, 2.3 years or something like that? Like that's the average, which means half of them are less than that. So it's like at the running back position, what are you really holding on? What are you really holding out for? It's like, the Frank Gores come along once every generation and a half. Everybody else plays for a few years and then it's kind of it. So
yeah, what people don't understand about the age curves, especially at running back, is it's a curve because it's a series of cliffs.
Yeah.
And it's just something, and guys go to a certain point and then they don't have it, see Dalvin Cook, right? 100%. And so, ride him while you can, and then trade him off a good year if you want, if that's your thing, if you're nervous about the knees. So to be clear for the audience, this is the one where Doc and I overlap. So Tajay Spears is also on your list.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So you're gonna have to arm wrestle me for more Tajay Spears shares.
I don't know, man. I could see you in the tank top down the Jersey Shore. Guns there, so I don't know. It might be a good matchup.
All right, my final value running back for the year going into 2024 is Ty Chandler of the Minnesota Vikings. And I put him as number one kind of because he's talked about a little less. He's probably the guy that I'm arguably the most above consensus on this list. And kind of related to that, probably has the biggest bang for the buck when it comes to outperforming what you pay for him. All right. KTC, he's RB 61, 54 on Fantasy Calc, 54 in the going for two composite rankings. According to DDL ADP, you can get him in the 16th round at 1610 at RB 54. Your boy has him at RB 38 in that infamous tier of RB 31 to 45. In 2022, he was a round 5 pick number 169. He was hailed for his size speed combo and receiving ability upside, which is kind of why I liked him. He landed on the Vikings, and things were interesting, right? You know, there was Dalvin Cook and then departing, and then there's Madison, but then they added Cam Akers. And so, but he did show flashes in 2023, particularly when Cam Akers went down with the other Achilles and had better peripherals all around than Alexander Madison. He had 4.5 yards per attempt in 2023 and also 4.67 yards per touch. He turned in a top 30 running back finish 3 of the last 6 weeks, including a week 15 game where he started and went 23 rushes for 132 yards and a touchdown against Cincinnati. Enter Aaron Jones to complicate the picture in 2024. So where are your outs with Minnesota? Well, I mean, with Ty Chandler, what are the ways that he can hit, right? One, with Sam Darnold at quarterback and uncertainty among the pass catchers. Addison might get suspended, Hawkinson injured for the first part of the year. Jalen Naylor, who I like, finally being your wide receiver 3, but it's Jalen Naylor and it's Sam Darnold. You lean on the running backs more. So there's a way, right? If Minnesota is just overall bad and he becomes a check down Charlie in garbage time, he hits. We don't care when the points are scored. We just care that they are scored. And Aaron Jones, between age and frequent injury and declining efficiency, where in 2023, Aaron Jones had career lows in explosive run rate and broken tackle rate, despite having 5 yards per touch, is another way for Chandler to get on the field and hit. So I think he's got some standalone, but very much a lot of contingency value. And I think he's the discount version of running backs like Tajay Spears, Jalen Warren. And as you can see by the hanging comma, I forgot to add 1 or 2 more that where I was going to put on that list, but I guess I was tired. And to put a bow on this, my first appearance on a Going for Two live podcast was the I Hate Division previews for the NFC North, I believe for 2022. And I picked in the last pick of the mock draft, I picked Ty Chandler just to be able to talk about him and say, like, this guy should be the backup to Dalvin Cook, not Madison. He's better than Madison. And so I've had my eye on him for a while. He's 26, because I think he was drafted close to 24. And so he's kind of on the older end of this bucket of running backs I usually pull from for this type of list. But I think is well positioned to, like I said, the James Cook and Ray Davis is the discount Temu Walmart version of Gibbs and Monty. Like, what if, Jones and Spears are kind of like, Jones and Chandler are kind of like, the discount Pollard and Spears or that sort of thing. And so a guy to keep an eye on, particularly when it comes to his cost. What say you about my guy, Ty Chandler?
I like it a lot. I think you nailed it. It's like, for the cost to upside ratio is pretty great. And I think at the very least, you're going to get some games where he's going to be, either a high end RB2 or a low end RB1, because you got to price in at least a few missed games for any starting running back in the NFL. And then there's always potential for more. So, I really like that. Even with the questions on the Minnesota offense, carries are given, targets are earned. So if he finds himself in the backfield there, he's going to get you some production. And I wanted to speak to something else that you were talking about, and it goes back to underdog, which I think, is a nice tie-in. Even though we mentioned the sponsor, it's like you talked about playing the game and doing your drafts and saying, what if I'm wrong? I think you can think about it in the sense of what if everybody else is wrong? And then you can kind of go off on these alternate universe team builds and just play out the builds. And it's like, well, what if this guy gets hurt? Or what if this guy underperforms and this guy ascends? And then that means this guy might be better. And that means that this guy might be worse. And, you just kind of stack these things up and, try to thread the needle on a few things. And if you're right, then, it could pay off pretty big. So he's one that the cost is really low. The upside is really high. And that's a good place to be.
Yeah. In the completed underdog drafts that I entered into, shout out Michael Dubner for his exposures spreadsheet, which has a free and premium version. I have 20% exposure to Ty Chandler,
Right.
and sort of you generally use 8% as the baseline because it's like 1 out of 12 people in the league.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely overweight on him for sure. And right now it looks like I'm getting pretty good closing line value on ADP, where like I've taken him and he's starting to rise. So yeah, definitely someone I have my eye on. Your fifth and final running back for tonight is?
Yeah, so I know you gave your guys kind of in descending order. Mine were in no particular order. Shout out Gladys Tyler. But this one is, we finally found somebody who's on the younger side. So it's Blake Corum, running back for the LA Rams.
Even your younger guy is old for a rookie.
Well, I do have a type. So the thing with this is it doesn't need to go any further than Sean McVay's fickleness with the RB position overall. I mean, we kind of saw it with Cam Akers twice, even after leading him to a Super Bowl. They just couldn't keep their spurs from jingling and jangling. And RB production-wise, like I said before, it's kind of a year-to-year thing. So I know Kyron Williams came in and, kind of saved the day. But, Cam Akers did that the year before and found himself out of a job without really getting hurt and almost got traded, multiple times. They just couldn't get together on things. So, Blake Corum, he had a great college career, which is, kind of putting it mildly. But injury or coach's whim could see him ascend to a 3-down workload and really be a league winner. And I don't throw that term around lightly. And it's really not going to cost you much to find out. So he's somebody that I'm very interested in. And the price seems to be, very right because of, I think, the recency bias of how well Kyron Williams did last year. But I don't think people are appropriately pricing in the risk that he carries, that he's not going to be able to do that again, either due to injury or, mitigating circumstances or external circumstances that he can't really control.
Yeah, I think Kyron Williams, Blake Corum, is, I think, one of the more interesting storylines to watch this year. And it's the one that people have talked about, among the one that people have talked about the most in the offseason, right? So there's a thesis that says Sean McVay likes to have, the same pretty much personnel on the field the entire drive, so you're not tipping off what you're doing, right? And so it's one of the reasons why he liked Kyron Williams, because he's a complete player with pass pro and receiving. And part of that thesis is that Sean McVay, therefore, likes to have one running back, one bell cow running back, right, over the years. And therefore, drafting Blake Corum, a guy who, while bigger than Kyron Williams, pretty much does the Kyron Williams things. Smart footwork, vision, pass pro receiving, proves that they want to use Williams as a bell cow because they drafted his clone and they don't want to miss a beat if he gets injured. The other thesis is Sean McVay likes a bell cow back when he's got one, but when Kyron Williams went down, was giving the ball to a million guys, Royce Freeman, Ronnie Rivers, Darrell Henderson, like these guys were all of them were getting touches. And that drafting Blake Corum, who A, is a Kyron Williams clone, quote unquote, and B, a more well-regarded prospect than Williams was coming out of college, even for people who were defending Kyron like myself, tells you that Kyron won't be the bell cow this year, and it's going to be, 2 drives Kyron, 1 drive Corum, that sort of thing. So there's some standalone besides some contingency there. I don't know which one I believe. I do think that ultimately, between just size and kind of overall being better at football, I think Blake Corum may, by the year's end, have this job and is the play for 2025. I don't know what thesis I believe of the two for 2024, but it's going to be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, you mentioned something in there that I think is really important that I kind of want to underscore, and it has to do with rookies and pass protection. And it's something that is super duper important in the eyes of coaches, but it's not something you have to dig a little bit and you have to do a little research to find out if, rookies are good at pass protection, because it's not something that typically gets reported. And I kind of dedicated a big portion of a chapter in my book, shameless plug, Injuries Suck, but your fantasy team doesn't have to, available on Amazon, that it's really important. So having a guy, especially with an older quarterback who's had some injury problems himself with Matt Stafford, pass protection is going to be really important. And candidly, with a lot of coaches, if you can't pass protect, you don't get on the field. And if you're not on the field, you can't score points. And it doesn't matter how good your efficiency is or how fast you are or what your 40 time was or any of that other stuff. So it's one of those things that can kind of fall through the cracks. And there are exceptions. Saquon Barkley is not known typically as a great pass protector, and he seemed to do okay. But he tends to be more the exception rather than the rule. So that's just something that it doesn't really get reported in most circles as far as things being important, but in real NFL talk, it's tremendously important. So I think it's good to weigh that into your rookie running back analysis, and that can help you out a lot.
All right. Well, it wouldn't be a Brian show if I didn't cheat and give you 17 million honorable mentions besides my list of 5. I'm not going to read off all the rankings, but these are guys who I left off the list for one reason or another. Whether it was because people talk about them a lot or I'm not as above consensus on them and that sort of thing. But if I had to do only 5 honorable mentions, it would be Charbonnet, Marshawn Lloyd, Javonte Williams, Jonathan Brooks, and Kamani Vidal. Vidal. I think that's how he pronounces his name. And then, of course, I just have pretty much every, 1B handcuff type running back listed there as number 6. Names that come from those 2 tiers I'm talking about for the most part when it comes to where I'm fishing for these running back values. Any names pop off the screen there that you want to comment on?
Yeah, one specifically, Tyler Algier. He is a really good football player, and I know that it's an inconvenient truth that happens to be the case because of the ton of resources that the team has placed at the running back position. But he's not going away, and he could turn out to be a much bigger thorn in the side for people that, and forgive me, the running back, the ultra premium running back that's there, went to Texas. What the heck is his name? What is it?
Bijan.
Yes, Bijan Robinson. Thank you very much. So he could be a much bigger thorn in Bijan's side than anybody that drafted him, 1 overall a couple of years ago or take him in the first round this year would care to admit. And I realize that's an uncomfortable truth, but that doesn't make it not true.
Well, I'll put it to you this way. Sean Siegel, who is, I think, one of the sharpest people in the fantasy space, puts out a zero RB target list essentially for every year. His countdown was 15 running backs this year. And Tyler Algier made the list as far as like a target. And he's really into Algier. I won't quote him, but like, standalone plus contingency. People sort of underrating like the dip between 2022 and 2023 in that he's probably more of the 2022 guy than the 2023 guy. And when you think about the size and the production, the sort of underrated athleticism and receiving profile, and when you throw in, the better coaching and better offensive environment this year, I don't know. Like, we've had a couple quotes, one from Bijan himself, that, Bijan's going to get used like CMC, like a bell cow. And, we fill in the blanks and say, oh, well, Zach Robinson, the offensive coordinator, comes from the McVay tree. He's going to want a bell cow. He's going to use Bijan. But then at the same time, you have a quote from the coach that says, love Algier. He's going to play a role, at some point, running backs get on the field. So yeah, I think, I think there's obvious love with, well justified for Bijan, and the optimism around that offense this year where everybody's to the moon. I think people are kind of forgetting about the role that Algier could play.
Yeah. Certainly underrating it. And that's not to say that Bijan can't just explode and be like, top 3 running back in the NFL. But if he doesn't get hurt and it doesn't happen, I think there's a pretty good chance that Tyler Algier is going to be the reason.
If I could pull one guy off this list, well, I'm not going to pull
one. You can do whatever you want. It's your show.
I'm gonna pull 2. One is Jonathan Brooks, just because I just am irresponsibly high on him. I have him ranked as my dynasty RB7 already.
Woo!
Yeah.
Daddy.
Which isn't too far above, the consensus. It's about, 5 or 6 running backs above consensus for the most part. But yeah, I think once he's on the field, his 3-down skill set in an offense that invested a lot in their offensive line, particularly the interior with the guards, on an offense that also has to sort of, in some ways, put the guardrails around Bryce Young, but in a different way than you have to put the guardrails around Will Levis. I think he's going to be he's going to be like JT used to be. Like, he's your 3-down guy, and he's going to be one of the few 3-down workhorses, and we're going to roll with it. And the other guy I would pull off is Javonte Williams. I know the vibes have been bad, but when you look at what he was able to do coming out of school and before the knee injury, and when you add in, not everybody recovers from an ACL like Breece Hall, and also he had more than an ACL. He had multiple ligaments, and that he's lost like 10, 11 pounds at Sean Payton's request, and that Sean Payton running backs eat no matter what. And his ability to, evade tackles and catch the ball, like, he's either going to be like, ugh, Javonte, ew, like boring, like inefficient, or he's going to be like, oh shit, we were totally underestimating Javonte.
Good calls, man. I got nothing. I mean,
well, from an injury standpoint, like, the narrative used to be like second year after the ACL, right?
Yeah.
But so maybe that's his schedule, but also when you throw in multiple ligaments, like, it makes more sense, does it not?
It does. And there's also a lot of mitigating circumstances there. There's the whole Russ drama there last year. Like, they were just a mess. So, it's like that plays in a part too. So yeah, he's certainly healed. He's still pretty young in the grand scheme of things. And, he's another year removed from the knee injury. So, why not? I think he's one of those guys where, again, this is like recency bias times 2 years now, where it's like people have been high on him for so long. I think there's a little bit of like Javonte fatigue happening where they're just like, oh, I'm not going, I'm not getting burned by this guy again. And then, this will be the year that it all comes together for him, and he has like a high RB2, like year. So I could certainly see that happening.
All right, that'll do it for our lists of 5 as far as value running backs go. Time to land the plane. Please subscribe, rate, and review on the Going for Two Live podcast feed. Please make sure here on the video side, whether you're watching on Twitter or Twitch or wherever else, the YouTubes, like, subscribe, comment, feed the algorithm monster what it must be fed. Sorry for the copy and paste in the show sheet that says plugs for Josh and Brian. Doc, time for plugs. Tell us where we can find you and your work.
Well, we already got the plug in. Injuries suck, but your fantasy team doesn't have to. Available audio, ebook, and paperback on Amazon and audio through Audible. As far as finding me, good luck. I'm changing diapers and playing with the baby. I'll be doing that for a while.
Are those two separate endeavors? Like,
hopefully.
Is the diaper changing not a baby? Like, is it some other thing you're into, or?
Listen, whatever happens amongst consenting adults is none of my business. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm happy to be able to come out here tonight before I go to work and, sub in for Josh. Very gracious to offer me the invite. But that's it. That's all I got. It was great to see you again, be able to do the Jersey Squared show. So hopefully the audience enjoyed it and they got some good information from it. And whichever side of the RB age pool you're on, I think we gave you something, for that. And thanks again for having me.
Right on. And you can find me on Twitter at ffjunkie_. Rankings going for 2.com. Sorry, Jeff, it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to do that sleeper article before the season starts, but I will try this week. And I might write a little more. Who knows? It just takes so much time to do it well, and I don't like doing it not well. Dynasty Fever podcast midweek. About every other week, usually with Jesse Schneeman from the Dynasty Warzone family of content. Excuse me, and that's more of a long form. I describe it as the best Dynasty podcast your league mates don't know about. Yeah. And it's like if two friends were talking about Dynasty Fantasy and you were a fly on the wall, that's kind of the format that we have. So
the two really smart, sharp fantasy football playing friends, not
I don't know about that.
Two chowderheads that are in your league that you're always, destroying with your trades and things like that. Like, these guys know their stuff. It's a really, really good podcast. I listen to it when I'm at work, so I don't care how long it goes. I'm here for the whole thing, but it's really good.
I love it. We have fun. We challenge each other. We joke, humorous tangents and things like that. You can follow that show on Twitter at Dynasty Fever Pod. Going for Two, family of content. Go to the website, goingfor2.com. We've got articles. We've got links to the shows, TFS, Redraft, Best Ball, Dynasty, all that jazz. And also, we have a free Discord, which you can find a link to in the description on YouTube of this video. And then I think there might still be a link for it somewhere on the website. It used to be when you first logged on, there was like a little purple thing in the bottom right. I don't know if that's still there. We also have a podcast just about every day or night of the week for you here. So please stay glued to this YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
And if you know, GTL.